The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hey everybody, Drew McClellan here from Agency Management Institute. Welcome to the members only webinar with Doug Austin. Can someone do me a favor and in the question box, can you just let me know that you can hear me? Hello. Okay, thank you. Such smart Alex. Love you all. All right, so as you know, I'm gonna tread water for a couple minutes here while we let folks get in the room. But while we are treading water, I am going to right before your very eyes, I am going to perform the magic that is handing over the presentation skills and tools to Doug. So sit tight while I do that. All right, now we are waiting to see Doug. So Doug, we can see yours. We just need to see the, yep.
Can you see it?
All right. Yeah, just make it do your, yep. Perfect.
Yep.
There
Got
you
it?
go. Yes.
Okay.
Can all of you see Doug's, love you too. Can all of you guys see Doug's screen? Okay, great. All right, I'm just going to ask Doug to sit tight for a couple minutes, and then
Sure.
it is a good green. I agree. I think it's money green is what that
It is.
That's
That was color of money, man.
I was gonna say I think Doug was going for symbolism there. Love it.
Mhm.
Yeah. All right. If you want to grab a glass of water or mute your phone, and we will get started in about 2 or 3 minutes. I don't want to penalize you too much for actually showing up on time, but you know how those last minute meetings are with folks. And I'm sorry if you hear a little background noise. In my world, I'm actually, as you might not be at all surprised to know, I'm in an airport lounge in between flights, and I've picked the quietest place I can. But of course, somebody decided to sit right next to me and talk on the phone. So, all right. So just a little housekeeping stuff here while I wait for other folks to get in the room. As always, Doug's going to start jumping into his presentation. If you have questions, I will be watching the question box. And if your question is pertained to specifically what Doug is asking, I may interrupt him and stop and ask the question at that moment if it seems like a point where we can take a quick break. But we will also have Q&A time at the end of the webinar. So have no fear, you will get all of your questions answered. Doug is happy to do that. I will then take the video of this webinar and put it on a landing page for you guys, and I will have it out to you before the end of the week. I'm headed into a peer group meeting, so it may take me a couple days to get it done, but I promise I will have it done by the end of the week. For all of you to review or to show your team. All right. All right. So let me tell you a little bit about Doug, and then let's get going. And again, please remember you have that question box if you have something that you would like to ask during or after Doug's presentation. So I want to introduce all of you to Doug Austin. So Doug is an agency guy from way back, worked in several agencies where his role was predominantly biz dev, and had some tremendous success doing that for other agencies. We talked about some of that on episode 179 of the podcast, if you recall that episode, or if you want to go back and listen to it again after you spend an hour with Doug. And then Doug decided to go out on his own and do consulting. And so now he's working with agencies to help them really create a culture of growth, to build out their biz dev efforts inside their agency, and to serve in that capacity. And I believe also, Doug, you have actually been on the biz dev team of a couple agencies, right? You've actually helped them pitch business, right?
I do. Yeah,
Yeah.
I do.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. So that's sort of Doug's background. I'm sure he will tell you more about it. So without any further ado, Doug, all yours. Go ahead and jump right into the presentation.
All right, you got it. Thank you, Drew, and thanks for having me.
bet.
Hi, everybody. As Drew said, creating a culture of growth is, and by the way, that is the color of money. That's the green money. Yeah. Creating a culture of growth is a workshop that I do around the country for agencies. And they usually are the principals. And if they're big enough and have a biz dev person, that's who shows up. So, but a bit about me and kind of, by the numbers, if you will. Drew mentioned I'm an agency guy from way back when, and I'll just say that's 30 plus, okay, without getting too specific. During that time, I've worked at 10 different agencies. And Drew, I don't know, but do you want to mute so your neighbors might not be sharing as much? Awesome. Thanks, man.
Yep.
Cool. Thanks. So yeah, during that time, I was at a variety of agencies. Started in New York with some independents that went through mergers. By way of Dallas, I'm now in Springfield, Missouri. All right. Been through 2 mergers in that time. Once at a very young age as an early account guy, and then later as a senior leader at another agency. So different experiences there. I have shepherded a group of agencies through an ESOP, and that was in 2011.
Which, by the way, not a fan of ESOPs, but that's a different webinar for another time.
Yeah, it is. I'm telling you, it can go sideways fast. It can.
Well, it's for the first generation of owners, it works great. Second generation of owners, the onus of managing it cripples the agency. I've seen it happen a bunch of times. So
yeah, I mean, luckily for me, after we were 3 years into that ESOP when we got bought. So everyone vested 100% and it washed away. So I didn't have. Yeah. Oh yeah. Listen, I know I didn't have to deal with any of it. So since then, involved with and led M&A teams for others, and so 4 pretty good acquisitions under my belt here in the last 3 or 4 years. 1 sale, and that was of the group of agencies that I ran. There were 4 agencies in this network that we ran that had been through the ESOP, and since then, and that was in 2016, I've worked with probably 30 different agencies in the US and in Europe. So a little bit of my background, and it's myself and a few folks on my team, and we operate out of Springfield, Missouri. So let's get going. Let's jump into this. So creating a culture of growth. In my mind, it's pretty simple, right? And I say this could be a really short presentation because there's only 1 slide. This is it. If we can create a culture that's built on trust and respect, then we really are gated for success in creating a culture of growth. A fear-based culture, which many of us have been in before or have witnessed others sort of self-destruct under, have a really hard time creating this culture of growth. So if we can build this on trust and respect, and then expect expertise from our team, I think those are the 2 main ingredients to creating a culture of growth. So let's dive down further into this thing, and starting with growth. I was told by so many younger associates coming through in the past probably 15 years as we were building up this last network of agencies that why do we need to grow? Why can't we just manage what we've got and stay right here? It's very comfortable. We're humming. We're winning for our clients. We're doing great work. Everybody's happy. We're making money. I said, well, I mean, we can, but we then risk becoming irrelevant and start to slide backwards. So I say growth is not a bad word, because growth is for maintaining relevance. Growth is for maintaining our clients. It's for creating an advantage against our competitive set, which, by the way, is shifting all the time. And growth really, at the end of the day, is to create opportunity for our associates to be better at what they do and continue to propel the agency forward. Because we all know, if we sit still too long in one place and rest on our laurels, so to speak, we start to slide backwards. So growth is not a bad word. Growth is a good word.
Do you think, Doug, part of that though is, when I hear agency employees say, "Oh my God, we can't go after that RFP or whatever. We're so busy, we're slammed." It really is about how they feel about their workload, but it's also that the agency has not built reasons why the employees would be excited about growth in terms of incentives and things like that.
No, 100%. I mean, it's a disincentive. Growth to everybody else just looks like more work for the same pay. Growth only looks fantastic to the owners. Let's be honest, right? We haven't done a good job as owners incenting people to want to grow, right? And that is a whole separate discussion that they're happy to have too. But you're right, Drew. That's exactly right. So with that, right? I mean, most folks also think that growing an agency is sort of a solo act. Let's hire the guy that's got lightning in a bottle, and he's this slick guy, and he knows everybody, and he can make it rain, and he's it, and we're going to all depend on him. We're going to pay him a lot of money even because that's our great white hope. Well, it's not. I mean, I think we all recognize, and if we don't, then here we go. It's more about shepherding the entire team to do their best, continue to learn, and everybody together pull together to help grow this thing. And that's, to Drew, to your point, like there needs to be an incentive for everybody to want to get behind this thing, right? So I just say that while it may seem like it's a solo act, the only solo act in there is this conductor, right? I mean, everybody else has got to pull on this thing or it's not going to go anywhere. So strategically, how do we approach growth? I say that there are really kind of some gotta haves, right? So we've got to make sure that our core is maintained and that we're expanding it. We got to protect what we've got. So our core expertise has got to stay relevant. Secondly, if we're going to expand, let's make sure we're expanding into strategic adjacencies where we have permission to win, meaning we're leveraging the most powerful part of our USP in a way that gives us permission to have strategic discussions in alternate verticals, right? We have the products and services that make sense to these other verticals if we can demonstrate it in a way that makes sense for them. And I'll get into that in a minute when we talk about understanding the business of our client's business, all right? Thirdly, I think training is a much overlooked strategy, and it really, I break it down into two areas. There's the functional aspects of training and the expertise aspects of training, and we'll talk about that. And then lastly, awareness. If nobody knows we exist, it's going to be really hard for them to call us up, right? There are some that report as many as 120,000 agencies in the US alone. And while that may sound ridiculous, it's even if half of that's true, that's a lot, right? So how are we going to stand out? So if we pull on these strategies and we say, okay, we're going to take a strategic approach to growth rather than a wait and see or even a reactive, meaning when the phone rings, we pick it up and say yes to any RFP, then these are the platforms we're talking about. For existing business, we've got to maintain that, we've got to grow, and we've got to expand. And what I mean by that is, if we're working with a brand that has other divisions, let's overflow into those. At the very bottom of it, we can't go backwards with our existing clients because that makes that second platform kind of useless, right? The new client acquisition or new business. Expanding inside our vertical and then penetrating these other strategic adjacencies that I just mentioned. Now, and it doesn't matter if we're bringing in new, if we're dropping existing ones out of the bottom. That looks like a treadmill to me, right? We're not getting anywhere. So how do we protect against that? Training. Training on not only our functional craft and gifts, but also on the expertise of the industries we serve. And lastly, exactly that, the industry. Penetrating that industry in a way where we're not only just attending, but we're integrating in it. We're getting involved. We're becoming part of the conversation. And I'll talk a little bit about that conversation as we go too. So if we do this, right, if we engage and get behind these strategies and we say, these are the growth platforms we're going to build a plan around, then you get a growth trajectory that might look something like this, right? And this will sound pretty familiar to most of you. If our current clients are happy, we're killing it, we're doing great work, and we're not only maintaining, we're actually growing. We're increasing revenues from our current clients. We're expanding into other divisions or other markets for them, and feeling good. So we're making a coin. We have some profit to share. Whether we do or not, we might reinvest it in something like training, right? So we're really taking this training growth platform to heart. We've doubled down on it. We're making sure that we have the best fortified associates in all the industry against things that help them do their craft better. The best technology, the best resources to pull from to have the smartest insights, whatever it may be. But we're also training them on the business of our client's business. We're helping them understand how our clients in I'll just use the food space because that's a big part of my background, food manufacturing space, helping them understand how food manufacturers actually make money is going to insulate us from the commoditization of a lot of the services that are out there today, right? So now we've got these folks that are trained up really well. We're feeling good. We've got money because our current clients are spending more with us. So you know what? We're sending an army of people out into the industry. We're attending the association events, conventions, trade shows, all that kind of good stuff. So
hopefully we're also creating content so that we are seen as a subject matter expert in the verticals in which we play, right?
Absolutely, 100%. And I'm going to talk about where I pull from to get that content in just a second. But you're absolutely right, Drew. Like without that, right? Again, you just have to accidentally bump into somebody and pretend or hope that you get a chance to be smart, right? So if we're involved in the industry and we're seen as being part of the conversation of the industry, meaning we're speaking, we're publishing that content that you just mentioned, we're on panels, whatever it may be, then we're actually seen because at these things, we all know, those are the movers and shakers and probably our prospects, right? And while we're there, that's when the new business starts to happen. That's when that awareness starts to happen and people say, oh, Austin Amplifies seems to be at every one of these events. I mean, I go to these 10 different things throughout the year, and these guys are at all of them, and they've got an army of people here, and that's fantastic. I want to work with them. They seem to know what's going on. And that's the flow, right? Like that's the trajectory of strategies put to these platforms working well. And that's great. And that's a positive trajectory. But it can go the other way too, right? It can go this way. We've decided to take the advice of junior associate that says, hey, you know what? Let's just sit where we are. We don't need to grow. We're fine. Okay, great. So a year goes by, 2 years go by. We start to really settle in and yeah, indeed, we've got the same clients, but they're not growing. In fact, they've stagnated and some of them starting to shrink. Because they're starting to shrink, I'm getting a little bit nervous. I can't hire anybody else. And I certainly don't have extra money to throw around on training. Because I don't have that, I don't have confident people I can actually send out into the industry. And I sure don't have the time to give up coming off of billable time to go out in the industry into the events. So we're just absent now. And now the conversation out in the industry isn't, hey, look at Austin Amplifies, they're all over the place. Now the conversation in the industry is, hey, what happened to those guys? They used to be at all these things. And you know what? You can rest assured there's a guy just like me standing right next to your current client going, yeah, I don't know, something's going on with those guys. So
or the conversation is you don't come up in the conversation because they've never heard of you before.
yeah, if you've never gone out there, you're
Sure.
right. They don't even know you exist. So, the trajectory can go one of two ways. And this is a great saying. It's one of my favorites. You're either green and growing, you're ripe and rotting. You're living or dying. You're going one way or the other. So which way do you want to go? Because sitting still really, it's not an option. You can't just sit still. You're going to go one way or the other. So what's it going to take to maintain what you've got? Let's start there. Relevance, that expertise that I've been talking about, and innovation. And the innovation really comes from taking what's being done to the next level, right? It's that old saying. It's necessity is the mother of invention, and it really is, right? And that's fine. We don't have to go so far out on innovation that we're spending $1 million in R&D, but we should be pushing the envelope forward all the time. And knowing where to go with that, I like to use this. This is an exercise I do with literally everybody I work with. And it's this service and talent audit that we all carry around in our brain as leaders. It's that matrix of all the things we offer today applied against the clients that we have today. And we either do it, which is an X, or it's an opportunity. It's one or the other, right? So if we're doing something for somebody, or we know we've got this skill or service that we can offer, but nobody is taking advantage of that, two things. We either don't need it, right, because nobody values it, or we're not doing a good enough job letting people know what we do, right? So this exercise, I highly encourage everyone to put it on paper, because it does move. It shifts all the time, right? And a lot of times, depending on the size of your shop, you might be only one deep in any one area of service. And listen, that's a reality, right? And so cross training, this is where training comes in, right? Cross training, so you have more than one person that can do XYZ service, isn't a bad way to insulate yourself from the potential of being out of that service offering if that person leaves. So what this also does is, aside from inform our training and hiring, it also allows us to say, okay, you know what? If this is what we offer, or this is what we can do, whether somebody buys it from us or not, if you go below this line and you build another chart of all the things your client's buying from somebody else, it also starts to inform where you should expand. So a lot wound up in this talent and service audit, and I wind up coming back to it a lot through these workshops that they do. So put a point on it, see what you guys really are doing. And last point on that, the dollar signs. Be honest about it. Do we really make money on this or not? And don't confuse making money with it being seen as a value to the client. I mean, a well-executed commodity, right, at a high volume can make money, but if it's not valued, that I would say is at risk. So just something to consider. So where can we grow? Kind of the usual suspects: new services, new divisions, new brands. Ask yourself, where with the clients that you have today, where can we expand with them? And usually, I mean, the quick answer is, well, we'd have done that if we could have already. But, sit back and objectively look at it. I just challenge you to say, maybe there's something you haven't looked at in a while, right? So.
Well, and also, what are your AEs thinking about? So often the AEs are, back to our earlier part of the conversation, they're super focused on servicing the client. But if they're not incented to grow the client, they believe their job is to keep the client happy, which means they're an order taker.
Exactly. And you know what? I mean, I think that's the first step to irrelevance, because, while they think they're taking care of everything by answering that phone or taking those orders, if you will, right? When you go to the how come room, and that's, how come we're being fired room, it's because you haven't brought them anything new. And that goes back, Drew, to your point. What's the incentive around that, right?
Yeah.
Excellent.
We see that in our Agency Edge research that over and over, clients tell us one of the reasons why they do walk away from their existing agency is because they feel like we're just kind of phoning it in.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. And that's where the innovation comes too, right? I mean, we've got to think in front of them. Have a whole sort of mini workshop on, ways to bring innovative thinking to them in a way that engages the rest of the agency, not just the team that's working on it, but another day, right? So how do we maintain or expand your value? So we've been talking about this. Let's become that expert for your clients and elevate the value proposition there. And that is really understanding the business of their business. How do they make money? If we can integrate that into the thinking of everything we're doing for them, we're just that much more valuable. And lastly, build a team that's prepared to lead the conversation, right? And that's through training and exposure, right? And we've got to give them a shot to do it. And the new business pitches aren't the place to test drive it. Out in the industry is the place to sort of test drive that. So competition. It's great. If we could do all that in a vacuum, that's awesome, but it's not. It's competitive, right? And, you know, the competition's changing all the time, and it's not always the usual suspects. We've got all kinds of players in here now. We've got other agencies, in-house, consulting firms, holding companies, and locally, if you operate in local market, it's sometimes the printers or the publishers or the broadcasters in your market.
Yeah, media companies. Yep.
Yeah, big time. You know, you look at the local Addies, which just took place this weekend. A lot of the winners are your local NBC affiliate. I'm like, oh, okay, well, you know, if you buy the space, we'll shoot the ad. Okay, I mean, I get it. I mean, that's the reality. That's where we live, right? And this one should scare us all, right? And for content, anyone with an iPhone and Wi-Fi is your competitor. It's true, right? And it could be a 12-year-old. So who we're competing with today is a little bit scary, but if we're open to understanding what it is, where we can create an advantage around them, we can do something about it, right? So with that in mind, in our core verticals, right, let's go deeper, right? Let's push deeper in the areas where we work today, whatever that is, whatever industry that is. People may say, well, you know, Doug, we're pretty much generalists, like we're, you know, we work in our market. Okay, that's great. And that's fine. But which of those types of industries, if you were going to focus on something, would you want to sort of double down on and be seen more of an expert in than perhaps just a communication partner, right? So let's make the partnership about understanding the business and not just about getting it done. And so you can see how we just drive all the way down to expanding that into the adjacent verticals that make sense, right? So, you know, that second pillar, so that's maintaining the core, and that's bulk of it, right? Like if we don't get that part right, it's hard to go to the second platform, which is new business. And I always say that, you know, look, let's not refer to this just as new business. There's a broader ecosystem that really ought to be taking place as we create a culture of growth beyond just the new business, right? Because we talked about that. If we just do new and the old ones fall at the bottom, then we didn't get anywhere, did we? So I always ask this: where do you have permission to win? And what I mean by that is, what have you done, what your experience may lie in, that with a little bit of effort can become seen as expertise rather than just experience? And that's where we should go fishing. That's where we should go hunting for our growth. I'll share a quick story here. One of the agencies in the network that we sold a few years ago, great shop, and their angle was really they were a high design shop, and again, remember, I was in the food and drink space, so B2B, so super not sexy, right? B2B food and drink is not super sexy. Fortunately though, great clients: Unilever, Starbucks, Nestle, Bush Brothers, Campbell's, Kraft, keep going, right? Like the big manufacturers. So this one particular group, they said, so I arrive on scene in 2008 as the business development guy. Bad timing, by the way, right? Who's growing in a massive recession, but we did, right? I started, and they said, hey, okay, Doug, we want you to go get Indian motorcycles. I said, oh, okay, that's awesome, great brand, love it, super exciting brand. What do we know about the motorcycle business. And they're like, nothing, but we're passionate about it, Doug. We're just passionate. Can't you get behind that? We're just passionate about it. We're great designers. Just, if you're all that, go get it. And I said, okay, all right. What are you going to say to him let's pretend I could bring the head of all of marketing for Indian Motorcycle to Springfield, Missouri, and put him down right in front of you. What are you going to say? What's the very first thing out of your mouth? And they don't know. And I said, guys, let's get real about where we have permission to win. We don't know anything about the motorcycle manufacturing business. We don't know anything about dealer associations or how they interact with the mother brand. We just don't. If you want that, then we've got to create some experience there and build that up to expertise. So in the meantime, let's go hunt where we can win. Let's go fish where we have the best lures, right? So I said, let's start with who's our ideal client? What's that look like? And they, so same group, I'll just keep that story going. They said, well, flipping through the trade magazines, they're going, gosh, these guys, that's like the worst ad I've ever seen. And, their website's just terrible. I said, we should go get them. We could save them. We can help them. We can really, do some good work there. And I'm like, great. I love you're channeling your passion at least into, away from the motorcycles, at least into the verticals where we have permission to win. I said, except, hold on. If we're going to go after these guys and they do terrible ads and they have a terrible website, that's an indicator that they just don't value it, guys. They don't value the creative. They don't value the strategy behind the insight that leads to a great communication. I said, go back to those magazines and find the best ads, find the best websites, find the people who actually value this stuff, and let's go help take them to the next level. That's what we can go do. So it was this helping people sort of bracket their thinking and sort of point their passion in a way that we could go do great work and win great clients in places where we have permission to win. So when I say, who's your ideal client? I'm really asking, who can we effectively win and do good work for? And so they have to be, in this particular case, predisposed to strong creative, smart insight, and an understanding of the industry, that they work in, that would allow us to come in and partner with them from a communication or promotion or PR perspective, right? And I say that because it doesn't matter whether we're advertising, and I say that in air quotes because somebody the other day asked me, what is an advertising agency these days? And we all laughed and said, well, it's, looks a lot different than it did in the 80s. But it's, regardless of what end of the field your communications is on, right? We should have a perspective for our clients on how to traverse the industry they're in a way that helps them stand out. I mean, that's what we do, right? We help them get noticed and be identified as being the leader or the first or the fastest or whatever it might be, right? So build this profile of who's your perfect client, who's that ideal client, and presumably that means that they value all the things that we have to offer that are in our set of services, and we identify those in the audit so we kind of know what we've got. They are collaborative, they're open, they can allow you to be a partner instead of a vendor, all the things that we would put down in our, our match for our perfect client. And it's important to do that first, right, before we jump to this. Because the prospecting, if we prospect the wrong client and we go get a whole bunch of folks who we don't want to work with, yeah, the phone will ring, like they'll be coming out of the woodwork, right? But it's the wrong folks and we can't make money and we don't want to work with them. I think we've all seen this. I hear many times how I wind up being phoned by agencies and owners as they say, Doug, our phone rings. We stay so busy answering RFPs. It seems that, a lot of people want us to work with them. And then when we get into it, we realize that they don't have enough money to do what they want to do. They don't really see things the way that we do, meaning they don't value the process and the creative and the insight that drives a well-written brief and all that kind of good stuff. And I'm like, well, I get it. That happens a lot, right? And they go, we're probably in 15 pitches a year. And I go, okay, well, are you winning any? And they go, some, enough to go back out. But what happens is when we are responding to people who are knocking on our door and we answer the door and they go, hey, we want to work with you. I mean, let's be honest, we're human. We get kind of, we're flattered. Oh, that's wonderful. We must be doing good work. Well, of course you are. You're doing great work. You're doing great work. That's why you've got clients. That's why you're growing. That's why you're keeping good people. That's why you continue to knock down the award shows. But it's like playing tennis. If anybody, I don't know, weird analogy because I'm a horrible tennis player, but I always want to play tennis with somebody better than me. I don't want to play tennis with somebody worse than me. So I'll go knock on the door of the best tennis player. And if they're feeling charitable, they'll give me a match. But if they're not, they don't have time for that, right? So sure, you're getting knocked on. Your door's getting knocked on. You're the best in what you do. You're starting to create some pretty cool awareness. People want to work with you, but we don't want to work with them because we can't make any money. So I'm simply saying, if we're going to do active prospecting, let's make sure we're prospecting against the people we want to work with. And let's go knock on their door, right? And so that's a little bit of a smaller set. By the time we knock it all down, you've really defined your client. There's some persona things that we keep in mind. Those are the people we want to work with. That we've identified our categories. We've identified the top companies and brands inside those companies. And we've created a awareness campaign because guess what? That's the business we're in. That shouldn't be too hard. And then we execute it.
Doug, what are some of the, like when you talk about a targeted introduction or awareness campaign, what are some of the things that you've seen that have actually broken through the clutter and worked for agencies that you work with or that you know of?
Sure, that's a great question. And I'm going to click it to this slide as I answer that, because that's really what you're saying. How are you going to introduce yourself?
Yeah.
And it's like this, Drew. It really is about understanding the conversation of the industries we work in. And once I understand the conversation, and when I say the conversation, put air quotes around that, the conversation of the industry is whatever is, keeping it from being bigger than it is today. It's the government legislation, it's popular opinion, it's pop culture, it's perception, it's whatever, right? There are things that shape an opinion about a conversation that are very human, and they're really easy to identify. And if we do that by saying, okay, let's take a look at the associations for this industry and understand what our clients need, because remember, we're doing a better job at understanding their business, right? And we audit the industry events to really understand what's being talked about in the breakouts and on the keynotes and things like that, and what's being published and who's actually speaking. That's going to drive us to a pretty short set of topics, okay? So for example, back to the food and drink one, because I know that so well. There was a time when salt was the new white death, right? I mean, now it's high fructose corn syrup and whatever, right? So, but whatever the conversation is, if I'm a manufacturer of food for schools and it's a heavy sodium laden product, I'm all of a sudden going to be out of business in schools. So my opening conversation with this very targeted list of people, remember I was really clear about who my target is. So I've created this list of prospects that I want to go after. And I lead with a headline that says, how to eliminate the concern about the sodium in your products when having a K-12 nutrition conversation. I'm like, okay, that's how I do it. Okay. I'm not saying, hey, you want to buy an ad? Or hey, how about you want to buy a marketing strategy? I'm saying I've got a real opinion on stuff that bothers me.
I'm creating content and I'm educating, right?
That's right.
Yeah,
that's right.
So you talk about building expertise with inside the agency, and I guarantee you, if I don't ask this question now, it'll come up in the question box. A lot of the agency owners, a lot of those industry events are at night, or maybe they're out of town. And a lot of the agency owners are getting a fair amount of pushback from their people that they want to keep their workday nice and tight in that 8 to 5 window. And you know what? They teach yoga, or they have kids, or they have to let the dog out, or whatever. So how are you seeing agencies incent their people to invest in becoming an industry expert, showing up at those events, being able to have these things which you're talking about? Like, I can have a relevant conversation. It is timely because I know it's a hot topic in the industry. I actually do have a point of view. You know, how are you helping agencies get their people excited about going above and beyond?
Yeah, now that's a great question, because it is it's something that, oh, I don't know, 10 years ago might not have been a topic, because the answer was, if you want a job, you'll go do it.
Right. But now there are more jobs than there are people who want the jobs.
Indeed. And I learned a new phrase not too long ago, and okay, boomer's not something you want to hear, right?
Right.
And yeah, so no, that's a great question, Drew. And so just 2 weeks ago, I was in Dallas with a group, giving a sort of a startup workshop with them, and a big part of that is the training part of it and becoming that expert. And here's the good news: technology is super friendly right now. Like, technology is way our friend. We can find podcasts, we can find discussions, we can find videos, we can find almost anything we need to be able to understand the conversation. So I do a conversation audit for everyone that I work with about the industries where they want to focus, right? And honestly, that's a couple of days just doing some really cool investigating and poking around, and it's all in line, right? I mean, it's at our fingertips, including, right, ways to be trained up in those things. So that can be done during the day, right? That is part of our normal work, right? So that sort of takes care of that part of the question. But the bigger part of the question is, do I want to, right? Defining the time part, I can help with that, right? Like, there's technology can solve for that. But if you don't want to, that's different. And I think that really is that's creating this culture of growth that says, look, if we all lean into this thing and everybody takes a piece of this, we can all do better, and I can share more out with you. So the incentive is sort of a group mentality incentive, right? And so we can demand it, sure, but they'll just push back and say, I'll go someplace where they don't demand it. I get that. So I really am putting this on the leadership to be sort of, I'd say, inspiring enough to get people to want to grow personally so they can be better at their craft. Because I think we all have to do that. Because the downward spiral, when we become complacent and irrelevant, makes it a pretty short conversation, right? So there's no great answer for that. I think that understanding what motivates your people and incenting them in a way that's seen as a reward for the effort is the way to go. And I also, I have a real perspective on incentive comp and variable comp, and how to build that into at pretty much every level except for the entry level ways to.
So tell us about that.
Yeah.
So we're already at almost quarter of. So
Yep.
But I know they're going to want to hear about that. So tell us how your take on how do you build incentive to create a hunger for biz dev when, as you said early on, for the rank and file, it just looks like more work.
Yeah. So first, look for volunteers until we have to volunteer somebody. But I mean, a lot of times we might find that someone in our ranks really does want to take on I'll be the social digital guru. I really want to lean into that, identify all the places where I need to go learn more, and go learn it and bring it back to the agency. Great. And there's an incentive for that. And it's a bonus, or it's a raise, or it's time off, or whatever floats their boat, right? Like, that's the great thing about what winds people's clocks and what motivates them. It's not always money, right? We can get creative with that. So that's first way. Second way is go back to that audit, identify where we're vulnerable, meaning we don't offer things that people are buying, and hire for that with an incentive to grow, right? So, okay, come in, you say you have this skill, that's great. Well, we currently, have just a little bit of that, but we know that's the way the trend is going. Help us fill that up. And there's a straight incentive that can be associated with that as well. And again, usually from a BD perspective, it's commission or money, right?
Sure.
But it's not always, right? There are ways to incent people to be more efficient with their time. I'm a big fan and proponent of the Great Game of Business. It's a open book management practice that says, look, if we get everybody to fully understand how we make money and where we make money, we can do a better job of making money, and create mini games out of being able to get better at whatever it is, fill in the blank, finish jobs on time and on budget, get things finished, on a scope of work for a fee that stays in scope, reduce corrections, whatever the problem that you have ferreted out that's keeping you from being able to grow as quick as you could. Create a small game out of that and incent people for that. And they don't have to be year-long things. They're 3-month things. They're 90-day things, things that I can actually see that we focused on and we accomplished. And what we're all going to start to see, and we've all done this, right? We've seen this in our own cultures. The confidence that comes with success is just the kind of juice that we need to continue to get it going. And they start to become their own accountability partners, right? That's this trust and respect. That's why I always start there. If everybody trusts that everybody is doing their best to be the experts in their own areas of influence and responsibility, then the respect comes and we can lean into growing as a team versus people resenting because somebody else isn't doing their job, right? So that's part of it. That makes sense?
Yep.
Okay, so I'm gonna cruise through here. So if the content is relevant and timely, and we talked about the conversation and how to get to that and identifying the topics and all the things people want to hear, and we're timing it right so that it makes sense with the industry associations and conventions that are going on, then it's execute. And guess what? We know how to do that. We're agencies. We've got inbound, outbound strategy. We apply it to ourselves, drive into our website where we're paying it off, and there we go. That's a pretty good introduction. So we've knocked on their door, and when they open it, we follow up and we make sure we're talking to them, right? Training, the third pillar, the one that is usually overlooked and does really like to be discussed in the context of a business development approach or creating a culture of growth, if you will, right? There's 2 sections, functional, all the stuff that makes the agency run, right? And, we've all been told, remember we were young, don't use the word stuff. Nobody gets it. Well, it's everything, right? How do we make money? How to be a better writer? How to write a good brief? How to sell creative? How to do all the things that we do in an agency to do our job. That's the functional part. The expertise part comes where we focus in on where we believe we have room to differentiate ourselves, to make that selling proposition a unique selling proposition to the degree that we can insulate ourselves from the competitive set. That's what we're trying to do. That's what we do for our clients every day, right? We try to tease out the difference between one chicken company and the other. At the end of the day, it both looks like dead frozen chicken on the truck, except that if you understand that one of these chicken companies is a completely vertically integrated company, meaning from seed to, offal, and that they're public, and the other one is not, they have different motivations. We're gonna do things different for both of those chicken companies, right? So that expertise is gonna give us a little bit of a window into why they should choose us versus the other 120,000 agencies. And that's what understanding the business of your client's business really means to me, all right? So we've got to pour into that. We've got to train them, right? We've got to help them understand what that is, because they thought they joined an advertising agency or a PR shop or a social shop or a fill in the blank, right? They didn't think they were joining a chicken company, right? Except that, understanding that's going to help us be better at what we do. So where do we begin, right? Go back to that talent and service audit. That's going to identify for you where you have opportunities and where you're at risk, right? And so bolster up on that. Go more than 2 deep in every area if you can, right? Lastly, industry involvement. We've talked about this a little bit, but just attending, I don't think is what we're going for. We want to be involved. Get yourself positioned as that expert. We've done a conversation audit. We know what the topics are. We know, because we're gaining expertise in these verticals, we know how to penetrate a syllabus for a conference and say, you guys are missing the big question on sodium here. And you know what? I'm going to bring in a nutritionist that happens to be one of my clients, and happy to do like a 30-minute breakout for you guys on the agenda. Great. Boom. You're the expert, right? Like, you're in. So get involved and really push for that expertise. And the other thing about the industry is they're not all the same, right? Trade shows are different than conferences, or different than association events. Have a clear objective of what we're really trying to get done there, right? I mean, just auditing it and hoping we bump into somebody who can read their badge is, not a strategy. So key takeaways here: create an environment that's built on that trust and respect. It'll go further. It'll be a safe environment where people can feel they can share their whole gift and not pull back. They'll feel safe enough to be completely vulnerable, and that's when growth happens, when we can actually collaborate and build on each other. If we understand the business of our client's business, we can up our value proposition immensely. If we generate awareness amongst those who we have permission to win with, then anybody, presumably, who knocks on the door, we want to work with. Then lastly, train the next generation to expect expertise. Help them understand why it's important and how it's going to help the whole community of the agency if we all pick a part of it and can attack on. And if there's a need for incentive or variable comp packages to go with that, you can get pretty creative on that too. And the other, don't forget the Great Game of Business. That's not a bad thing to check out if you haven't. And then lastly, being involved in the industry of your focus vertical is kind of a little bit of a guarantee that we're at least hanging around people where we have permission to win, right? So that's what I had for you. And so Drew, I'll let you see if there's any questions.
So while I'm waiting, so you guys can fire away questions. So when you are pitching with an agency, what are some of the things you're seeing them do during the pitch that A, differentiate them, and B, make them look different, better, smarter than sort of the stand up and talk to the PowerPoint slides?
Right. So a couple of things that I kind of do as a matter of course. Part of what we do when we go to a pitch, and let's be generous. Let's say a 90-minute pitch or an hour pitch. We spend a lot of times on who we are and the introductions and all that. No. I like to do, so I like to control the room too, because, guess what? I'm a little bit of a control freak. So we tell the clients where they're going to sit, and what I put in front of them is sort of a placemat, if you will, right? It's the people in the room with their names, their titles, the big idea that we're bringing to the pitch that day, and just a little bit of flair about the agency. Two things doing here. One, not everybody remembers everybody's name, right? You introduce somebody, they immediately forget. And now during the meeting, I feel bad because I don't know your name. It's subconscious, but I feel bad, so I don't like you. They're going to pick you on whether they like you and trust you. So let's make it real easy for them to like us. Let's make it real easy for them to engage with us. So that's a simple little thing. The bigger thing is bring the audience of whoever is sort of the heart of your idea. A lot of times, they're going to want you to react to a brief or give some spec creative or whatever, but bring the audience into the room because they don't know yet, right, how your level of expertise runs. But if you deliver your pitch or your position or your idea or your promotion through the eyes of the consumers experiencing it or the customer, whatever, then that can go a really long way. And now I've got their customer in the room. So understanding the business of their business means understanding their customer or consumer. So bring them in the room. And I literally do full-size stand-ups of whatever the persona is that we're doing. And I refer to them and I run the whole thing through their eyes as they experience it, right? That seems to go pretty far. It's pretty successful.
Okay. Guys, any other questions for Doug? I know we're getting close to the top of the hour, but. Here's a question. As far as priority, what would you say the number one thing we should be doing as a B2B agency? Jim, do you mean in terms of like, what do you deliver for clients? or are you talking about biz dev? Biz dev. So if they're a B2B agency, what's the number one thing they have to do to be successful in terms of biz dev?
I'd say on the B2B side, industry and being positioned themselves as experts in would be the number one thing. The B2B side, in my experience, tends to be pretty sticky if you can understand then the communications. So for example, in the food space, it was understanding the realities of not only the supply chain and the manufacturing of the products, but the logistics of distribution and the 3-tier distribution chain that was happening there, to the degree that I could help sell not only to the end user, which is the restaurant, but the sell through to the distributor. So it's just understanding all touch points in their business.
Okay. Other questions, kids? If you have limited time, would you be podcasting, LinkedIn posting, or trade shows? Or something different, if you don't think any of those are the right choice?
Okay, if I had limited time to generate awareness, would I be podcasting, LinkedIn?
Basically, if you're trying to convince your little part of the world that you're an expert, would you be podcasting, posting on LinkedIn, going to trade shows, or doing something different?
You know, honestly, I would probably choose the trade shows, because I can at least, if I can make an eyeball to eyeball connection with at least one person, rather than putting it out waiting for people to see, I would take that. And so the work that I do before I attend any trade show or convention or association meeting or whatever is find out who's going to be there and reach out to them before I get there. And they don't always answer, right? But at least when you meet them, then you've already had a soft introduction. Because if you can at least eyeball with somebody, then you've got the door open.
Yep.
And that to me is a lot more assertive way to at least be able to be seen, rather than LinkedIn is great. I'm not saying any of those things aren't great, but if I only had to pick one, I would pick the industry involvement.
Yeah, and I would vote that you do something, a piece of research or something, and try and get to be a speaker at that trade show, right?
100%, 100%. And that's where the conversation audit comes in, and identify the spot that they're missing and fill it.
Yeah. Other questions? Jim says, thank you. Great input. Anybody else out there have a question? I mean, Doug's seen a lot of pitches. He's seen a lot of biz dev teams. He's seen a lot of biz dev professionals. If some of you are thinking about hiring someone to take the spot that is typically held by the agency owner and driving biz dev. So any of those are fair game for questions if you have any. Mm-hmm. So do you have an example of like what somebody might send in advance of a trade show? Do you have a sample or something that we can stick on the landing page, or can you describe it?
Yeah, so if somebody said, okay, Doug, you're gonna go to the Aeronautical Engineer Association show next month, and I had identified that I'm really going after the R&D and engineers, then even if they didn't have this year's list published, I'd go to last year's and assume that most of them are going to be there. And then I would make sure that I understood what they're about to hear, because they've published what's happening at the event, of course. I know all the breakouts and all the speakers and everything else. And I would lay that over what I took as the audit to the industry. And I would find one or two things, right? And ideally a couple things that were either missing, right? And I wanted to fill in that gap with a perspective, or I have an opinion on something that I know is going to be spoken about, and I would reach out to them directly. I mean, direct email is the best way, I think, for me, because if you can get it in the topic, something that's more meaningful than, want to buy a brand strategy, then I get pretty good return on that. And I say that because by the time you focus this thing down and drill this thing down this far, the open rates on what I do for the agencies, once we've drilled down on the topics of the conversation, are in like the 30-40%. Like, so we're grabbing them immediately and it's unexpected. And so they're opening and they're listening and there we go. So I would do that. I would absolutely do that and see if they would like to have a coffee. You're not going to make a pitch. You're not going to do a presentation. We're not going to do anything except meet somebody at those things. I think we need to be real about the expectation around that.
But it's a start, right?
It's the start.
Yep,
Yeah.
great.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Anybody else? Any questions before we wrap up with Doug? I want to be respectful of your time. Going once, going twice. All right, Doug, thank you very much for your time. Thanks for sharing your expertise. Any last thoughts from you for the group as they peel away at the top of the hour?
No, just keep knocking them down. We get to do it again this year and next year. So just keep at it. Happy to chat with anybody anytime. All my information's on the screen there. Just shoot me a text, give me a ring, shoot me an email, whatever. Always like to talk about the business.
Okay.
So, cheers, everyone.
I'll include all of that on the landing page as well. So thanks, Doug. Appreciate it.
You bet. Thank you, Drew. Good to talk to you.
You too. Thanks, guys. I will get this on the landing page and get you the information of how to access it by the end of the week. If you have any questions for Doug that you don't think of till tonight at dinner or whatever, shoot them my way and I'll make sure I connect you to him so you can have that conversation. All right. Talk to you soon. Thanks, guys.
Okay. Bye.